This is the Big Friendly Swim podcast because I'm big and I'm friendly. And I'm so glad to have you on. For those who might not know you, can you, I guess, just introduce yourself and just detail your history within the sport of swimming?
I'm currently doing a master's degree at Louisiana State University as I finish up my fifth year of eligibility, granted due to the COVID pandemic. I spent the last 4 years getting my undergrad in psychology at the University of Michigan, and I guess that's pretty much what I've been up to lately.
Nice. So I want to jump right into speaking of the pandemic. It's a question that I always love asking people because I always get really interesting answers because it affected everybody differently. So I'm curious if you can talk about how it affected your roadmap to the Tokyo Olympics and whether or not you think that extra year of delay either helped your preparation or hindered it, or just how did it change your preparation for the Olympics?
I think trying to figure out if it helped or hindered is kind of a challenging question, but it definitely put it off course, that's for sure. I didn't expect to be returning home. I literally just got a Snapchat memory. Today was the day we found out that NCAAs were canceled in 2020. So it was definitely a roller coaster. I mean, luckily being in Michigan, I was super close to home. It's only like a 2.5 hour drive. So I drove home pretty much immediately, and then I got one practice in, which would have been the Friday morning with my club team in London, Ontario, and then they shut everything down. So it's kind of crazy to reflect that we're 3 years away from that moment, but COVID is still impacting the world. But as far as training went, I think it was the motivation in particular was really hard for me, especially once the Olympics had been postponed. I think once NC2As had been canceled, I was like, okay, well, trials can still probably happen in the Olympics. And then trials were postponed, and then the Olympics was canceled. So I think each step of that kind of made the motivation more challenging. So I was like, I'm not training for anything right now. And there weren't any pools open. So I was just trying to get my exercise in however I could, which I mean, for swimming was particularly difficult because there weren't pools open and it's hard to relate what you're doing on land to the water. And I'm not a great land animal. I mean, most swimmers aren't. We don't quite enjoy running. So that was challenging. And then I think it was March 24th or 25th that my mom suggested we open our backyard pool, which coincidentally was the one that I actually started swimming because we moved into the house that had a pool, and my mom was worried about water safety for both my sister and I. So that was safety was the main reason why we got into swimming. But it was kind of crazy to see the whole moment kind of full circle and get me to the Olympic podium a year later. But I mean, I'm still super happy with my results, and I've said it before. I think if it was any normal lead up to the Olympics, I think I would have had more firm goals as to like times or placings that I wanted to achieve. But I think the Olympics happening in general in 2021 was a gift in itself, and I definitely don't take that for granted.
I think that's a mentality a lot of people have of just the fact that they even happened was like, okay, cool. This is a privilege. Like we're lucky to be here. You know, now that you mention, I just realized it's like about 3 years ago, like this week, that everything started shutting down. I'm probably gonna get like a Snapchat memory myself of like when my community college season got canceled. So sort of building off of that, and I think a lot of people experienced some mental health crisis during the pandemic itself, but you've talked openly about after the Olympics and the pressure that you felt and like some of the mental health struggles that you went through. And I think it's really important for people who have a platform to talk about that. I think it's wonderful when people talk about that. And you talked about the decision to swim relays at Long Course World Championships. And at least on a surface level, it seems to have paid off. You set two world records last year, won gold at Commonwealth Games, won gold in the 100 fly at Short Course World Championships. So I'm curious if you could talk about both the decision to opt out of individual events at Budapest, and then in your own opinion, how you feel the results of those decisions panned out.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I think it turned out the best that it could have. I mean, my year steadily improved as we ended December of 2022. I mean, two world records was definitely something that I never thought I could achieve, let alone at the same competition. So that was definitely a goal of mine, and the 100 fly is definitely my baby. So to finally get it in that event was really special. But anyways, back to the first part of your question. It was something I discussed with Ben Titley, who was coaching Swimming Canada at that time in February. This was about a month, 2 months before he got a new job coaching in Spain. But I think it mainly stemmed from the fact that I wasn't getting the training that I know I needed to have been doing last year. And I think that's where a lot of the stress and the pressure and the mental health kind of comes into play. I mean, everyone kind of talks about how they feel post Olympics, and it's definitely different for everyone. But for me, it was very much like, oh, I've just accomplished everything that there is to do in the sport, and just kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to accomplish next. Because I've always usually had like a time goal or like a placing goal or a record goal, something like that I was always aiming for. Um, and then because I accomplished the world record December of 2021. So I had hit that goal. And then I think January on was kind of trying to find my love for the sport again, which was, I think, challenging because the coach that had coached me to my first world title, to the Olympics, and my first NC2A title, NC2A record, like everything in between, he had just taken a new job about a month before the Olympics. So that was, I think, a really challenging point in my life. And then heading back to university, knowing that he wasn't going to be there and that things were very different, and I don't think I was prepared for that. And I've always been a creature of habit, so I think having that switch up, especially in my fourth year, I'm like, this is how things should be, but they weren't kind of turning out that way. So I think that was the most challenging thing for me. So as soon as I finished up NC2As in my college career last year, I guess right around this time last year, I headed back across the border and finished up my schooling online and started training with the center, High Performance Center Ontario, full time. So that was more a sense of normalcy for me, having been training with them throughout COVID for the first little bit of it. So I think that definitely helped me get back on the right track. And then while I was in Europe last summer for a slew of meets and the World Championships, which were moved to Budapest, I had decided that I was going to come and swim for my original coach down here at LSU. So that's basically how I ended up here. And it's been a really great decision and a great move for me. And my swimming is definitely improving and feeling just as good as ever. So hopefully the results next week will show that. But overall, I think it was definitely the best decision for me. And on top of that, I had fractured my elbow at the NCAA championships last year. So overall, not a great meet, not a great swim season from like September to whatever, April ish. But definitely turned around, and I think it was definitely the best decision for me.
I think that if anything, it sets a good example for younger athletes who have this mentality of like, I need to do. That sometimes it's okay to not completely step away from something, but just to step back a little bit and take some time to reassess and figure out what's best for you. So I'm curious if you could talk about the moment that you realized, like, okay, I could be decently good at this swimming thing. Like, I could get somewhere here.
Well, I started competing when I was 8, which would have been like September of 2008. So I think I was coming off like the post-Olympic momentum from watching the Beijing Games. I mean, my family, we've always loved watching the Olympics, but I think the earliest one I remember is 2012. But I think definitely that was one of the reasons that I wanted to kind of compete. And for me, at that point, it was definitely about just making friends and meeting people. I had a great group of friends when I was little, from the time I started up until I was graduating 17. So definitely still keep in touch with them. But I don't think it was until I probably made my first junior national team in 2015. I competed at the 2015 Australian tour team that we did. We took like a contingent of us down there. And then I also competed at the Junior Worlds in Singapore in 2015. So I think then I was like, okay, this could be possible. But I think at that point it was still, everyone wants to go to the Olympics, but a very small percentage of people actually qualify. And I think that was still my mentality, probably up until 2019 when I won my first world title.
So that actually leads me perfectly into my next question of if you could I want to know if you could describe that moment after you won gold in the 100 fly, and then sort of building off of that, like at the time Sjostrom was basically seen as like this unbeatable force. Like basically like Katie Ledecky but for the 100 butterfly. So at the time nobody was even looking at anybody else in the final to win. But come the Olympics, it was obviously a different ball game. Like you were the reigning world champion. People knew your name, and I'm curious if you could talk about the differences in your feelings before and after the race for both world championships and the Olympics. Sorry, I know that's a very layered question.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I guess I've always been very into swimming. I mean, kind of whenever I started, I would devour statistics and times, and I always knew my times. I knew my times of my competitors. I knew the times of my friends. Just my brain has a weird way of memorizing numbers, and I mean, I memorized 100 digits of pi for fun during COVID. So I just have a very wacky memory when it comes to numbers. But I don't know. I've always like been very involved in the swim world, and I'm constantly looking at results or whatever. So I think once I retire, I'll be very bored with my life. Um, so I had known who Sarah was, and that she was this great legend, and especially in the hunter fly and sprint freestyles at the time. But I don't think I really knew anyone other than her per se. I mean, Penny, of course, and the Canadian hunter flyers like Katrine and Audrey, who had been more like 2012, 2016 era. So I guess I kind of went into Worlds like not knowing what to expect. I was like, this is my first senior team. Like whatever happens, happens. And I mean, I wasn't expecting to go such a fast time and drop. I think I dropped a second and a half at trials in April, like right after NCAAs. So I was like, okay, like I already dropped time. Like a medal might be cool. We'll see how it goes. And then we won a medal the day before on the four free relay. So then I went in and to my hunter fly final, and I was like, I have a medal. Like I've made a final. Like whatever happens will be icing on the cake. So I really wasn't that nervous, just in the fact that I wasn't really sure what to expect. It was also my first time doing semis, so I'd only ever done prelim final. And then after the race, I feel like it was all such a blur. I mean, I don't think anyone was really expecting that, including me and maybe even my coaches. But I think it definitely was a big learning curve for me, just learning how to kind of conduct myself as a professional athlete and see how people act in the ready rooms and how professional they are because it was completely new to me. But definitely going forward with the more expectations and pressure, it is nice to kind of know your competitors a little bit and be able to like have a conversation with them and not feel so daunted in the ready room, which is probably arguably the scariest part of swimming, I think. But so yeah, going into Tokyo, I think the extra year, I don't know, I don't want to say that it put extra pressure on me to kind of, I mean, I put the pressure on myself to kind of back up what I did in 2019 because I wasn't like, oh, this was like a one time, like a fluke somehow I magically did this. But I also feel like having COVID and having that extra year and knowing that everyone had different restrictions. Like most of the Americans, I feel like were barely out of the water. In Canada, we were so locked down, we were out of the pool for months. So I think just knowing that we were having the Olympics, like I kind of said before, was just a miracle in itself. So I was didn't have pressure on myself in that sense. But yeah, so going into the final, I think I was sixth out of semis. Um, I mean, I couldn't really see Emma or Zhang or Tori who were like further in the other lanes. So I think it was really good for me to kind of just focus on my race because I have a very different strategy to those girls who tend to go out a lot faster, but I tend to come back stronger on the second 50. So I think that was my mentality going into it. And my club had actually rented out a drive-in movie like close to where I live. So I was like, I just need to make finals. So I think that was the part where I was the most nervous. But I remember not being nervous at all leading into the 100 fly final. And I was beside Sarah, which I think felt kind of comforting to me because I had been beside her for prelim semis and finals at Worlds in 2019. So like, I mean, she with her broken elbow, I don't think she got the same amount of training in that she would have normally. So she tended to go out. She usually goes out fast on the first 50, but this time I think she was out slower than me. So that was a little bit different, but just like having her there and being like, oh, like I've done this before, definitely gave me a sense of like ease, I guess. And then after the race in Tokyo, it was really nice I kind of like having finals in the morning because then you have all day to kind of relax and kind of get it all out of your system. I mean, I had 4 or 5 days off of competition after, so I could like do my media, call my parents, my family and stuff. So that was really great before I had to like get back in the zone and do the last relay. Because when you have a win like that or you have a really great swim, it's really hard to kind of refocus that quickly and be like, oh, I have to swim again, like now. Because the emotional aspect I've learned, especially through college, can be quite draining. almost more so than the actual swimming itself. So it was definitely a whirlwind, but I wouldn't have changed anything.
You know, I remember specifically watching that 100 fly final, and like, no personal negative feelings towards the American announcers. I just don't like how they do things. Um, but I remember them. I remember like the last, like, you won that race in like the last 10 meters. Like you said, like you swam a different race, and I mean it paid off in the end. But so probably the question I'm most excited to ask you about, I think, because I suck at dolphin kicks. I there's a reason why I swim like the mile where I have to do like one dolphin kick off the wall and that's it. Um, but it's often said that you have some of, if not like the best dolphin kicks in the world. And I'm curious if you could share some of the training you've done to cultivate that. And then like this is, again, like, more curiosity, if there are any sets that you're comfortable sharing that were either like the most difficult or the most fundamental to your development of your underwater dolphin kicks.
I would say, honestly, I think it's just because it's so much more natural to me. Just like the movement was like I kind of picked it up really quickly when I was little. Freestyle kick, like I did a test set once where I was like a 50 all out fly kick and a 50 all out free kick on like however much rest I needed just to like see. And I think this was when I want to say 14 long course meters. I did like, I think I went 36, I think, in my fly kick. And then I did the free one like 5, 10 minutes after, and it was like 40 seconds. So I think that's just a testament to like how difficult free kick is for me. I mean, nowadays I can easily kick like a 30-point long course 50 fly kick, but I still struggle getting under 40 for free kick. So I think it's just more about natural ability. Um, and even like my freestyle, like swimming hasn't come along until a lot later in my career because I feel like a lot of freestylers kind of get good and develop it a lot younger. And then I feel like the other strokes kind of come along after that. But for me, I feel like it was very much the opposite. I was good at flying back, and I am back in the day. And then now I don't think my freestyle has just started to kind of catch up with that. As for training sets, let me see. Nothing that really sticks out. I feel like my coach is just on me all the time, and he's on me so much that I can like hear his voice in my head now, which is probably in my nightmares too. But no, I
It's
can just
okay. I
hear
can hear my coach's voice too.
you like, no, you can't do this many dolphin kicks. You have to do this many, or like no breathing here. Like lately, I've been trying to work on not breathing on my second 25 of my 50 free. So like whenever I want to take a breath and I'm like about to, I'm like I can hear his voice and I'm like, okay, I guess I won't do that then. So it's mainly just I think about the training and just practicing it over and over again, which I really enjoyed doing as a kid. Just like there's a certain like calmness to like being under the water. I mean, nowadays we have the underwater speaker on, so it's not as peaceful as it used to be.
You just play
Um,
music on that thing? Oh,
yeah,
that's cool. I wish we had one.
one. Yeah. But I think it's just I don't know. I've always enjoyed just being underwater.
That's a pretty interesting answer, actually. I'm like, thanks for talking about that and talking about like the sort of, I guess, like the feeling of underwater kicking for you. That's really interesting. So my last question for you is one that I tend to ask most athletes. I've got like a couple questions that like generally apply that are interesting questions that people will answer differently, and then I try to like have like 70% of my questions be fairly unique to the person that I'm talking to. But so representing Canada, you've won over 24 like major international medals, and I'm wondering if you could talk about like maybe some of the medals that meant the most to you. It doesn't even have to be like a race that you want to medal in, just a race that you felt was most like helped your development on the international stage or just as an athlete.
Okay, now that's a very interesting question, which I haven't honestly thought much about. I think honestly it's kind of crazy when you say like I've already won over whatever 24 international medals because I feel like I'm still relatively new to the international stage, and with COVID, I feel like I missed out on a lot of opportunities to kind of do that. But yeah, no, it's something still surreal because I feel like I never thought I would have accomplished that by now. I would say one of the ones that influenced my development the most was probably I want to say the four free relay in 2019 at Worlds because It was my first international relay experience. Secondly, like swimming on a relay with Penny and Taylor and Kyla was super amazing. And then I just think overall it was about who I was kind of swimming beside and kind of learning how to manage those nerves when I definitely am not the greatest, a perfect example of me not being the greatest freestyler. Like I had Kate Campbell on one side of me, who was the 2015
Who
world
can
champion.
drop like 50-point splits like it's nobody's
Yeah.
business.
And had a world record at some point. And then Simone Manuel on the other side of me, who was the co-Olympic champion from 2016. And I think my best time was like 2 or 3 seconds, 3 or 4 seconds slower than them probably. So I was like, crap, like I want to do well for Canada. Like we hadn't won a women's relay medal at Worlds since 1978 at that point. So I was like, I need to figure out how I can swim with them. And looking back on that race, I held my own surprisingly well, and I think that was the most daunting thing I had experienced up until that point. So I think that was a big learning experience for me. And then I don't know what I would say the other one, if there is another one. Maybe the medley relay in Tokyo, and I think that was because it was just such a learning experience that whole week and learning how to manage emotions, learning how to manage kind of being in the village atmosphere and managing like the emotional roller coaster of an Olympics. So I think that was another important moment for me. But I would say those two definitely stick out for sure.
You know, you mentioned that like the Canada hadn't won a medal on a women's relay since 1978 at Worlds, and I was almost surprised because at least it seemed like in the past couple of years Canada's put together some really good relays, both on the men's and the women's side.
Definitely. The men are definitely kind of picking up now heading into Paris. I mean, we have very young guys who have kind of come through the ranks the last couple of years. And I think the extra year definitely helped the men's team for sure to kind of gather the experience and just the maturity overall going into the next cycle. But for the women, I mean, I think 2015 was their big kind of coming out moment. And we've kind of just carried that momentum through. And I think there's still way more to come from us. We were the relay, the 4 free relay that I was talking about at Worlds in 2019, we were the only team where everyone was 19 or Kyla was 18, but we were all like under 20. So we were the youngest team. So that definitely showed that we had a lot of room to just mature and get faster as we were so young. So I think there's definitely more to come as far as that's concerned. But yeah, it's weird to think about how like Canada hadn't won a relay medal in so many years because I always feel like Canada's been pretty present on the international scene. But we definitely have made it more so in the last couple of years.
You know, I definitely have some U.S. bias because I'm from the U.S. But I've always been excited seeing other countries winning medals. Like I've been excited the past couple of years seeing like Italy win medals on the men's side a lot. So it's always exciting for me seeing other countries winning medals besides just the U.S. It makes it at least a lot more like engaging and interesting to see like try to stack up relays and see which team is going to end up on top. So the last thing I've got for you is just at the end of every interview that I do, I like to give whoever I'm talking to time to either promote something, they could promote a sponsorship, they could plug their Instagram, or just talk about whatever they want. So this is your time.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't really thought about anything. I mean, I'm definitely excited to see what LSU is going to do at NC2As next week. I think that's going to be a really, really fast meet, and it's going to be my last one. So hopefully, I'll put up some good performances.
You know, I've got my. You mentioned it being like your last college meet. I've got my last college meet in a month, and I'm like, I'm processing those emotions of like end of your college career.
For sure. And I mean, I've thought about it a couple times. I mean, we leave Monday, which is so soon, but like, I don't think it's going to hit me until we get there. And I mean, for me, I don't think I mean, I loved swimming college, and if I could swim it for another 10 years, I would. But I don't think it'll be that big a deal because I'll still be swimming after. So I think it'll be more emotional in the fact that my friends and people I've grown up swimming with, or some of my old Michigan teammates or friends from Canada that I'm going to see, they're going to be done after this. So I think it's going to be emotional in that sense that we've spent so much time together in the last like 4 to 10 years, and that their career is going to come to an end. But I'm glad that I get to be there to watch them and support them.
I'm definitely really excited to see what happens next week. I'm pretty much the only person in my swim team who pays attention to like NCAAs and meets like that. So you mentioned like being very like analytical and focused on times and statistics. I'm definitely the same way.
Yeah, sometimes it's good, but then other times I'm like, it kind of can bite me in the butt. Like I'm always like, conference week is the worst because there's always so many different meets going on, and my coach is like, "Do I have to hide your phone from you?" And I'm like, "No, like it's fine." But like sometimes like it's motivating to me, and I think that's why I do it. Like at SECs, we were an hour behind the ACC meet, right? So sometimes I'd check to see what the results were at that meet before I'd swim, which could psych me out, but also like make me realize that, oh, I should actually go fast. Um, but other times I'd be like, oh, I don't need to check that until afterwards. So, I mean, definitely can be stressful, but I also find it motivating. And I think it's important to kind of balance those two emotions.